Welcome back to Forward Progress, your source for NFL betting, powered by the Hammer Betting Network and Pinnacle Sportsbook. As a reminder, we'll be using prices today from Pinnacle Sportsbook. It's the world's sharpest sportsbook and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what professional bettors have known for decades. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. Must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly. Not available in the U.S. I'm your host, G-Stack George, and today I am joined by three particularly expert NFL opinions. I've got Fabian Sommer with me. I've got the Hitman, and I've got ClevTA. I want to thank you all for joining us. Let's start off with the AFC East, which we'll be talking about, and I want to talk about the Buffalo Bills. Last year, they entered the season as like the number one power rated team, favorites to win the Super Bowl. Josh Allen was one of the favorites to win the MVP, chalk favorite to win the division. The market seems to be more down on them entering this year. But my question is, should they be? Zuma, I want to start with you.
Yes, because their division has gotten significantly better. No, because I think I'm probably a little bit higher on the Bills than last year. I like a lot of their additions to the team. I think that Josh Allen really underperformed due to that injury and having his wide receiver two playing through a high ankle sprain for most of the season. So I think if the Bills are downgraded from last year, it's mostly due to having a much stronger division this year.
Cleve, do you agree with Zuma? Did you like Buffalo's offseason, or were you surprised they didn't attempt to make to go out and get a true number two weapon?
Yeah, I think they're going to rely on Dalton Kincaid to be their number two guy. So obviously, they instead of going after a second receiver, they just decided to go towards tight end. They needed an upgrade from Dawson Knox, and so I think Kincaid's the guy that they're going to hope to be that kind of second option. Although typically you don't see a rookie tight end outperform so early in his career, but the guy does have a lot of skills. He's a really good hands and could offer some major mismatches, but in general, look, this team was, I think we all forget, they were a powerhouse beginning of last year. I mean, they did lead the NFL in point differential. They were number one in DVOA. Like, this is a really good team. And I think if they didn't fizzle so badly against Cincinnati in the playoffs, we wouldn't, I don't think people would be so sour on them, but it was just such an ugly end to the season that I think that's what is, masking some of the perception here this season. They did let Leslie Frazier, the DC, really struggled. I think on third and fourth downs the most, especially with his play calling. They had the widest gap by far in the NFL defensively from early down defense to late down defense. They were number two on early downs and one of the worst in the NFL on third and fourth down. So if they can clean up some of those high leverage spots on defense, Sean McDermott's going to be calling plays. We'll see how that goes. That transition's always a question mark when the head coach is calling plays, but it can't be any worse compared to what Frazier was doing last season, especially in the playoffs where Joe Burrow picked them apart. So I still think they are rightfully, right behind Kansas City in terms of power rating in the AFC. And they're clearly a strong Super Bowl contender.
When I look at the odds board for this division, it kind of, I draw a huge parallel to last year's AFC West, where Kansas City, underperformed expectations the year before, and all of a sudden, first time ever, you're getting them as a plus money to win the division. And then the ready-made team that went out and acquired a veteran quarterback like Denver, the Jets did that with Aaron Rodgers. And then there's the second-year head coach who everybody's high on, and the young quarterback, Brandon Staley and the Dolphins, and I see parallels there. And then you even got the New England and Las Vegas Raiders aiming for the middle ground where they're not good or not bad enough. I remember, Hitman, you tweeted out last year, hey, right now's the time to go bet Kansas City for the division. I don't believe these other teams are ready to knock them off the perch. Is it time to go bet Buffalo at plus 120?
For me, it's personally not, but I agree with what everybody said about Buffalo. I mean, it's a really good team. It's kind of similar to what we talked about last week with the Cincinnati Bengals. I was saying, like, listen, I really like the team. I like what they're doing. They got the best offensive line they've had in years and everything, but it's just that the division is really tough. And I know that Buffalo at a lot of points has been priced even better than Kansas City in market. I know last year Buffalo was laying 2.5 in Kansas City, at one point during the season, which is pretty crazy to look back and think about. But I still don't put them in the Kansas City tier personally, at least for me for this year. So I think that unlike last year with the Kansas City AFC West, I think that this division, although Buffalo is rightfully the favorite, this division maybe is a little bit more up in the air than what that was.
All right. When we talk about division, one of the teams that everybody seems to be at least higher on right now is the Jets. They've got a brand new quarterback. He's making some flashy throws in training camp. Denver felt the same a year ago. Do you draw that parallel, Zuma? Or like, do you think, or do you think this is a better situation for Rodgers stepping in with the Jets than Russell last year with Denver?
Hard comparison, to be honest. I think this is a cleaner situation because Aaron Rodgers, he had that down year, so to speak, but he's also starting from a different level than Russell Wilson, in my opinion. I was high on Denver last year, but I feel a little bit more comfortable about the Jets season being some kind of success than I felt with Denver last year. I think that Aaron Rodgers, yes, he had a very underwhelming season, but he's also coming into an offense. I think that offensive line will be okay with some upside depending on Mekhi Becton actually playing a full NFL game. Um, he has Garrett Wilson as his number one receiver. I like the depth at wide receiver. I'm not really high on the offensive coaching staff in general. I really have to see them making a difference, but I think that Rogers will be fine in the Jets offense, and their defense is pretty solid too.
All right, Cleve, we talk about Rodgers, and 2 years ago, he's playing at an MVP level, and last year, he's playing below average. Let's just assume that neither of those are going to happen again. Which version of Rodgers do you think is closer this year? Is it the MVP guy from 2 years ago or the guy who may have lost a step last year?
I mean, it's a cop out, but he's right in the middle there. I don't think he was as bad as the kind of perception is. He was 21st in EPA, sure, but if you look at some of his PFF grades, kind of absent from the results, he was more of like the 12th best quarterback. He was fourth in their big time throw percentage category. His receivers did not do him any favors. Seventh highest drop rate, and I don't think it was coincidental that they started to make their run last year in Green Bay when Christian Watson started to break out. I mean, I looked at it this morning. He started to get more than 30% of the snaps for the first time in week 10 last year. So if you look at Aaron Rodgers' EPA from week 10 on, he was 11th best in the NFL. So again, I don't think that's coincidence. He had no weapons really to help him. And whatever was going on with his finger. So I don't think he's elite level. I don't think he's MVP level, but I think he's, borderline 10, 15 range. So I think it's perfectly fine for what the Jets need. They don't need Patrick Mahomes necessarily. They just need really good, kind of above average to good quarterback play. And I think he can give that to them. So, for me, the question marks for the Jets are more, it's not necessarily Aaron Rodgers. It's the offensive line. You got a rookie center. You've got, who knows if Mekhi Becton's going to, ever play. He essentially hasn't played in 2 years. So you've got a bottom 5 to 10 offensive line, which Rodgers has really never had. He's had top 10 level offensive line play in Green Bay for the last decade. So that's going to be interesting to see how he adjusts there. And I don't know, with Hackett and the offense, how quick of a transition it's going to be. The guy's been playing with one franchise his entire career, all of a sudden switch things like this. It's got to be a tough transition. And, their first 6 games are absolutely brutal. Probably the toughest in the league. You play like 5 games against the top Super Bowl contenders in the NFL. Like, to me, if they can get through that first 6-game stretch, call it 3-3, I think they've got a legit shot. At that point, I would look to them from a futures perspective. I would not take them at all. Even if you like the Jets, taking them kind of preseason doesn't make any sense at all to me based on the first month and a half. Like, you've got to sit and wait and see what happens. I mean, even if they go 4-2, like, their odds aren't going to change that much from a Super Bowl perspective. But if they go 2-4 or 3-3, I think it's perfectly reasonable to then back them at a better price. So that's the way I'm looking at the Jets season.
All right. And Hitman, it sounded to me earlier like maybe you thought the Bills were a little bit vulnerable. Do you think the Jets are their biggest contender in this division, or do you think it's Miami?
I personally think it's Miami, and I agree with what everybody said about the Jets. About maybe if you are looking to back them a little later in the year. I could especially see them maybe struggling a little bit early because Aaron Rodgers. The one thing that we've heard about him throughout his entire career is Rodgers needs to trust his receivers, or he won't even throw to them. We've heard that in Green Bay a lot, and it could take a little bit of time for this Jets offense to get going, especially because I'm not in love with Nathaniel Hackett as the play caller, although I know that obviously was Rodgers' handpicked guy. But I think Miami, if Tua stays healthy, which we obviously it's a question mark, and that's why if I am looking to bet Miami, I'm looking to bet them in more bigger payout, long shot odds, alternates, wins, division, all that. I think Miami is the second best team in the division. Um, Personnel wise, obviously they're absolutely loaded at the skill positions with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. You have play caller that, although their running game wasn't amazing last year, he is known as a run game guru. And you did see towards the end of the last season, they did get it going a little bit more. And then you have a defense that added Vic Fangio, which is probably the biggest coaching upgrade as far as assistant coaches in the entire league this year. And you have now a Bradley Chubb in for the whole season. You have Jalen Ramsey. It's a defense that personnel wise could be top 5, top 6, especially with Fangio coordinating it, and an offense that was really good last year. So personally, I think that Miami is the team that could challenge Buffalo in this division more so than I think the Jets will challenge them.
All right. Zuma, Hitman mentioned Miami adding Vic Fangio and Jalen Ramsey, and I thought David Long was one of the more under the radar signings in free agency. Miami's defense wasn't very good last year. In fact, they were a really good team to bet on their overs last year. Do you think the collection of roster and coaching upgrades will be big for the Miami defense this year?
Yes, absolutely. I think top to bottom, we can make the case that Miami is more talented from a personal standpoint than the Jets. I still have the Jets slightly above Miami just because of Aaron Rodgers versus Tua, and I also think that Miami's offensive line has a few question marks, especially when you consider the health of Teron Armstead in years past. I think that Miami is slightly more fragile than the Jets going to the season. Um, Talking about the whole season, there's also the possibility, Hitman mentioned it, that I mean, one concussion and Tua's season could basically be over. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of uncertainty due to injury. But I think yes, having Vic Fangio there, I mean, they have a good defensive line, they have a good linebacking corps. I really like the addition of David Long, stout against the run, good occasional blitzer last year for the Titans. And when he left in week 13 or something, you really saw that there was a hole in the middle of the Titans defense. Um, Secondary, very good. Maybe they could need more juice at safety next to Javon Holland, but I think overall that's a very talented group there in Miami, and I'm very excited about them if Tua stays healthy. Yeah, very talented team.
Cleve, I want to talk to you about like the thought of coordinator comes in, he tears it up, hot first year, and like the ones that come to mind is Brandon Staley. A lot of people were high on him. Kevin Stefanski winning Coach of the Year in his first year, and then like I don't know if the data supports this, but a lot of people think these coaches end up taking a step back. Do you see that same for Mike McDaniel? Is there a world where defenses start to figure out his offensive wizardry, or do you think he actually takes a step forward as a play caller and as a head coach this year?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it has a little more. He has a little more staying power only because we've seen the Shanahan system work for so long, and at different places. So, this isn't like a one hit wonder type of deal, in my opinion. And even at like a guy like Stefanski, I mean, yeah, the second year of Baker Mayfield, they took a step back, but then again, they were a top 10 offense with Jacoby Brissett last year. So, these guys, and Sean McVay obviously continued on his brilliance. So I don't know. I don't really buy into that as much. I think circumstances matter. Obviously, if Tua's out, and you're going to stick Mike White in there, then maybe the offense isn't going to be as good. So I think it's just a quarterback situation. But I think they'll be fine. There's an under the radar signing. They signed Braxton Berrios as their number 3 receiver, and no one's going to talk about him, but it's a guy I've always loved. I loved him in college. I thought he was underutilized with the Jets. He always made plays. I think he's the perfect guy in that system and that offense underneath. I think he's really going to open things up. He's going to be a surprise early on in the year and just make the offense a little bit more dynamic. So, I think it's really comes down to the offensive line, and it comes down to Tua's health, which, we don't know. Do like Mike White a little bit more than what they had last year at backup if they needed a couple of games to spot play. But, you're definitely going to have to get Tua fully healthy for the entire season to really maximize this offense. And defensively, the one thing, obviously, we know the Fangio coming back or becoming the defensive coordinator is a huge addition. This defense was really good against the run. They struggled against the pass. It's just because they really the Boyer scheme last year was all about the all-out blitz, and it left those cornerbacks on an island. And Xavier Howard just isn't as good as he once was. He's more of a number 2 or 3 than he is a 1. And they were getting burned a lot on big plays on high leverage downs. So, getting Fangio more, safeties back, keep everything underneath, limit the explosive plays, I think is really going to help this defense. Adding Jalen Ramsey obviously was huge. So, again, I think all 3 of the teams up top have a shot. You can make a case for them not only to win division, but win the Super Bowl. So it's pretty unique in that situation. But, I think Miami and the Jets are very close. I have Miami just a smidge ahead of them. But you can make the case for all 3 of those teams winning the Super Bowl.
All right, sounds like Hitman and Cleve have Miami at number 2. Let me ask the Jets fan, Zuma, who do you think is closer to dethroning Buffalo? Do you think it's the Jets or do you think it's Miami?
I still think it's the Jets, but it's not like a huge gap. I still prefer to have what I would prefer to have Aaron Rodgers and the Jets over Tua over the course of a 17-game season. But it's pretty close. Miami is so uniquely talented, so I can definitely get the case there. But in a head-to-head match between the two, I would probably still side slightly with the Jets.
This division has this dynamic where I believe there's like 3 legit Super Bowl contenders and the division's up for grabs. And then like New England, who may have improved this offseason, like almost stands no chance. They're a clear number 4. Hitman, when you think of New England, everything goes right for them this year. What does their ceiling look like?
It's tough to say because I never want to doubt Belichick. Obviously, his ATS record in the 20 plus years he's been there, a lot of it was with Brady, but it was just unbelievable. Like the Patriots ATS during that run were better than the best NFL better in the world if you just blindly bet New England, which is insane to say over that long of a sample size. So I hate to just dismiss them, but it just seems like a team that their makeup is going to be that they're able to beat inferior opponents and inferior coaches just based off their coaching alone and their discipline. But they lack the talent to beat the top teams in the league. And even if you look at how they played last year, when they went against weak quarterbacks, Zach Wilson twice, Sam Ellinger, Teddy Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett, Mitchell Trubisky, they were first in EPA per play against, and then when they played a step up in competition, they were in that sample size, they were 29th in EPA per play. So it's just a team that seems like they're going to take advantage when they play the Arizonas of the world. They're going to take advantage of the situation. They're going to look pretty good, but they just don't have the talent to match up with teams like Buffalo, Kansas City, Miami, teams that have competent coaching and just a way better roster. And I also think that it's a team that it's probably going to be an under team again this year, as their offense just really lacks a lot of explosiveness. Even the additions that they made, Mike Gesicki's more of a possession receiver, Juju Smith-Schuster, possession receiver, Tyquan Thornton's the most explosive player possibly on this offense, which isn't saying a ton and for the passing game. So it's probably going to be an under team that's well coached, and I probably think they're going to be around 500 again.
I think their most explosive player was actually their cornerback, Marcus Jones, last year, who had a couple big plays. You talk
Yeah.
about that dynamic of them beating up on like really bad offenses and really bad quarterbacks. I believe because of that, the perception of their defense was a lot higher than it truly was. And I found there was a lot of good betting opportunities when they actually did line up against a good team. Zuma Hitman mentioned the offense and lacking explosion. You tweeted something out and got a lot of feedback about Bill O'Brien and questioning how much of an upgrade he is over Matt Patricia. Do you think Bill O'Brien is a big upgrade for the New England offense?
I think he will certainly be an upgrade over that mess that Matt Patricia was last season. But I'm not sure that's going to be a monumental upgrade because I don't really like what Bill O'Brien did at Houston offensively. I mean, he had Deshaun Watson and prime DeAndre Hopkins, and that offense consistently underperformed in my opinion. Like they finished 19th and 17th in overall DVOA in 2018, 2019. In 2018, the Texans arguably had the worst run offense in the league, and Bill O'Brien called, I think, 54% runs on neutral first downs, which consistently put them into bad situations. And also that 4 week stretch early in 2020 before he got fired, they were like, I think, 18th in offensive DVOA. So I really think that the offense underachieved. And while, I mean, everything structural wise, it's going to be an upgrade over Matt Patricia, but I don't think it will be as big of an upgrade to really move the needle for the Patriots, especially when you are in a division with the Bills, Jets, and Dolphins defenses. And when we look at their schedule, I mean, look at their first 4 week, like Philly, Miami, Jets, Dallas, like they could
The whole
legit be
schedule,
0
it's
for.
brutal. They've got a
Yeah,
tough schedule this year.
yeah. I mean, there are not too many winnable games in my opinion. Even though I'm still high on Bill Belichick in general, but it seems like it's going to be a rough season in Boston with that
Um,
schedule.
Cleve, I wanted to talk to you about job security and from two parts. There's been some whispers that, Robert Kraft's unhappy with Bill Belichick's job recently. I can't see a world where they let him go before he breaks Don Shula's record. I can't envision that. But the other guy who also has job security concerns is Mac Jones. If he doesn't take a tangible step forward, it's probably his last year as the New England starter. Do you agree with that? Do you think Belichick has any cause for concern? And then do you think if Mac Jones doesn't take a real step to show that he's better than he's been, then they're probably looking at a new quarterback next year?
Yeah, I don't. It's hard for me to say that Belichick's job's on the line or anything like that. I mean, even if ever it came down to that, I'm sure they would structure in a way where he just steps down versus ever getting fired. I don't think that would ever come out that way. But with Mac Jones for sure, yeah. And it's interesting. You guys were talking about the schedule. I have it as the toughest schedule in the NFL. I have them favored in 2 games versus Washington and in London against the Colts, and that's it. Like, this is absolutely a killer schedule. And you look at Mac Jones, he's 3-9 against a spread in his 2-year career as an underdog. He's got 2 wins. One of them is in that windstorm game on Monday night against Buffalo, where he attempted 3 passes. So he's really only contributed to 1 win and 2 covers in 12 games as an underdog. So when you look at their schedule, and they're going to be an underdog in 15 games, 14 games. Like, I don't really see many wins on their schedule. And, Hitman took the words out of my mouth in terms of the defense. In aggregate, every year they're number one in this, number one in EPA and DVOA and all that stuff. But when you really dissect what they do, they just completely chokehold the bad quarterbacks on their schedule. They suffocate those teams or in those quarterbacks. I mean, if you look at the game logs of every team in the NFL last year, New England's defense had 2 of the top 7 and 3 of the top 11 best EPA defensive performances for any team last year. And it was against the Colts with Ellinger and against the Jets with Zach Wilson. Like, they take those bad quarterbacks and they just have no shot. So if you're going to back them, you would do it against a team like a Washington, for example, if it's, Sam Howell going, or even against the Colts, with Anthony Richardson. But even then, they struggle against mobile quarterbacks. So maybe Anthony Richardson can do some things against them. But Against everybody else, I mean, against guys like Lamar Jackson and Kirk Cousins and Justin Fields, they allowed, one of like the 3 or 4 best performances for each of those quarterbacks last season. So, there's huge splits there. They're going to face a much tougher schedule with a lot better quarterbacks this year. They're going to be underdogs in pretty much, almost every game this year, where Mac Jones has not done anything against underdogs, or, as an underdog. So, like, I don't really see much upside here. And Hitman mentioned, they're an under team. I actually think the opposite. I actually think they're more of an over team. If you look at when they faced these better offenses, they gave up huge points last year. That 5 of the 6 highest opponent team totals that they, in games where they were playing good teams, they all went over. 6 of the 8 highest overall totals went over. So, when they face good quarterbacks, I think the market kind of depresses the number a little bit, because they see just in aggregate New England's defense is much better than we think, but they're really not, and they get exposed, and so they tend to play shootouts in those situations. I looked at the Baltimore game last year where there was 66 points, I think, scored. And that Thanksgiving night game against Minnesota, there was a ton of points scored. So whenever they go up against good offenses, they go well over. And whenever they play bad offenses, they go well under. I think there's not much in between. You can look to some alt totals, I think, both on the under and over side, depending on who they face. So, the Patriots season is going to be really interesting. Like, if you really wanted to get nuts, go find me worst record in the NFL and or fewest wins, and tell me what the Patriots are. Like, give me a 60-1 or a 70-1 or something, just for fun, because I could see a scenario where they just completely collapsed, and this is just a dumpster fire against the schedule. But yeah, as you can tell, I don't have many high hopes for the Patriots this year.
In basketball, like, nobody would ever question Popovich tanking, except when the one year, the once in a lifetime prospect came. He clearly tanked last year, and Bill has never had a tanking attitude, but he might also look at the reality of the situation and say, if they're like organically 0-4, 1-5 to start the season, he might start thinking about what his next quarterback could look like. Let's take a look at the win total numbers and the Super Bowl numbers. And everyone's favorite thing is forced bets, stuff that they wouldn't make, but we're forcing you to do so. Buffalo is 10.5 wins. The over is -155, under +130. The Jets are at 9.5 wins. Over is -127, under +107. Miami is also 9.5 wins. Over -122, under +103. And New England is 7.5 wins. Over -111, under -107. Zuma, if you've got to make a bet out of those 4 options, which one are you going with?
Guess this might be popular, but I'm going with Pats under 7.5. If you look at that schedule, it's really hard to find 8 wins for all the reasons that everyone has mentioned here.
Hitman, when you see these options, which one would you be forced to make?
Mine would be Jets under, but if I was to look to bet that, I would look maybe after Hard Knocks, because sometimes we do see in the market, a lot of times all the public will see, they'll be watching it, or there'll be all this hype train with them. We got to see it with the Lions recently. So maybe if we see a little bit of the market going up just a tad with the Jets hype during this August, maybe bet the Jets under at post, but that would be my force play right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. If I get a 10 there, I'm probably going to blast on the under. Cleve, what is your favorite of the 4 teams and the 8 options you have?
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to the New England under 7.5. I think at this rate, it's a pretty good number. I think it's only being propped up because of Belichick's career, but I don't think they deserve that number at this point. So that's what I'm going to go with. And like I said, the second kind of bonus, wait till the Jets. If the Jets are 3-3 after 6 games, you can get like a 25-1 or something. It's 25-1 or better. The Super Bowl, I think that could be a decent number at that point. They're 18-1 now. What I forgot. I didn't hear what you said.
Pinnacle's got plus 1210 on the Jets.
12. Whew. Yeah.
They have Buffalo at plus 955, Miami at plus 2254, and New England plus 5347. I'm going to give you guys one more force bet. If Pinnacle said to you tomorrow, hey, you got a $500 free play, but you got to bet one of these teams to win the Super Bowl, which do you think is the better bet based on available prices? Zuma, let's start with you.
Oh, that's a good one. Based on the price, I would probably go with Miami. Seeing it
Hitman.
at plus
Yeah.
22 to 1.
Yeah, my play would be Miami also. I have Miami power rated as slightly better than the Jets, so that type of discrepancy isn't warranted in my opinion.
Cleve, who would you bet if
Yeah.
you had a free
Yeah,
run?
I'm going to make this a sweep. That Miami, just based on the free roll and the upside, is probably the right call.
All right. I don't know if you guys can tell by all the Dolphins gear behind me, but I'm good with that. I don't need to add to that. Guys, I want to thank you, man. This was a really good discussion on a division that I think is loaded with maybe 3 of the 8 or 9 best teams in football. Thank you for your time. This has been Forward Progress. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Please leave us a note telling us what you agreed and disagreed with today. This has been Forward Progress with the AFC East Division Look right here on the Hammer Betting Network.